Good afternoon. Nothing like being one of the last sessions of the day and getting to talk about Wind Up, which I know always has people really super excited. So before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, as I understand it, the Turrbal and the Yagara people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I think given what we're here for today, I'd also like to acknowledge their stewardship and governance of these lands for many centuries past, and to acknowledge that this land is not ceded. So, are you okay? That's generally been the reaction when I've said to people that I'm the chair of a board of an organisation that is winding up. Just so you know, yeah, I'm fine. In fact, I'm better than fine. I'm really proud of our thinking, our decision making and how we engaged around this challenge. And I'm proud that the Centre for Sustainability Leadership has a new home and an opportunity for a new life. So let me tell you about our story. Let me talk you through our end game. First, a little about me. My name's Helga and I'm a governance and strategy advisor, mentor and coach. I work with organisations, groups and individuals to help them engage and to think wisely about how they can do an even better job of making the world a better place. I'm a board member of the Royal Women's Hospital in Melbourne, and I'm a former board member of YWCA Victoria, Social Housing Victoria, and of course, until quite recently, I was the chair of the Centre for Sustainability Leadership. I'm passionate about gender equity and diversity on boards. And through that, I've founded two programs. Board Kickstarter, which is all about getting women on boards and preparing them to be on boards, and Board Accelerator, which is about supporting them while they're on a board. And I'm also the host of a podcast, my new podcast, Take On Board, which is a weekly podcast where I speak with women directors to get tips and tricks about being on a board and getting on a board and being our best in the boardroom. All of which means coming to a conference like this is really what gets me, I'm a governance geek and a podcast geek all together, so this is the best place I could possibly be. So before we get into it, can I just check, how many people here are board members of not-for-profit organisations? Right, okay, quite a few. Is there any government boards here? Former, okay. Any other sorts of boards that are here? One, what's the other sort? Companies, yep, great. All right, so for everybody here, how many of you would rate sustainability, and obviously not the environmental kind, but the financial kind, how many of you would rate sustainability as being one of your top 3 challenges? Yeah, that's probably why you're here. So don't worry, just because sustainability of your organisation is one of your top 3 challenges, don't worry, I'm not going to send you all back and say, oh, there we go, sorry, that you have to shut up shop. But I think we do need to talk about the end game. Indeed, as organisations and not-for-profit ones, which is most of the people here in the room, I think our aim should be to wind up. What's better than achieving our vision and not having a need to exist anymore? I know when I was on the board of the YWCA, our aim was to improve the lives of women by ending inequality. What would be better than achieving that and then just disappearing into the sunset? So I think we need to know how to play the end game, and we need to know how to play it well. And indeed, knowing a little bit about the end game may help to avoid playing it altogether. So at CSL, the Centre for Sustainability Leadership, I know that we haven't done everything perfectly, but we've learned a few things along the way, and we want to share some of those lessons. And to, in particular, to know that it's okay. Indeed, sometimes it's the right thing to do to wind up. So it's entirely possible, I guess, that, that we've just become experts at reframing. That's possible. But we really believe that this has been a positive decision for CSL, for us as the board, for the staff, for the alumni and others that were involved in the organisation. So let me tell you our story. CSL was founded in 2005, and the CSL mantra was that if you can't get the people in power to care, let's get people who already care into positions of influence. CSL had a bold manifesto to understand and foster the type of leadership that we believed was, and indeed is, needed. So our startup phase, like many organisations, was run largely on enthusiasm and passion. The founder, Larissa Brown, was brilliant at getting people enthused with her. She brought on philanthropy and donor funds, and as the program grew, we supported more and more people to get out there and make a difference. However, in a story that I'm sure will be familiar to some, the initial startup phase moved quickly, perhaps too quickly. Systems and processes were thin on the ground, governance was weak, staff were tired, the board was tired, people were often working for free. Everyone was just running out of energy. So the next phase for our organisation, and this is in the late 2000s, was to build the foundations of our organisation. And again, as I'm sure many of you know, even when you're building the foundations of an organisation, it's not like you can just stop and get everything in order. You have to be able to walk and chew gum. So this wasn't all plain sailing either. And with Larissa, the founder of the organisation, gone, and with CSL having been around for a few years, so we weren't bright and shiny and new anymore, the funds were getting harder and harder to find. This meant that we had to change our business model. Two things: full-time staff were moved to contracts to stem the outflow of cash, basically. Yet all the while through this period, the staff remained incredibly committed. And as an organisation, we just continued to do what we do best, and that is to find, support and build change makers to make the world a kinder, more sustainable place. So I joined the board in 2016. I'd been interested in the organisation for a couple of years after applying for the CEO role in 2013. At that time, I did quite a bit of research around the organisation. I spoke with alumni, I spoke with the founders, I spoke with funders, I spoke with former board members, former staff members, and a whole range of other people. CSL had a magic to it. Everyone just seemed to be in love with the organisation, and as a result of seeing people go through it, I was a little bit in love with it too. Now, I didn't get that role, which was totally fine, but I maintained my interest. So I applied for board roles when they came up, but they'd never been quite the right skills match. And I know we've spoken a lot today about making sure you get the right skills match, and if the person's good but not got the right skills, don't put them on. CSL did that. They didn't put me on when that wasn't the right skills. But eventually in 2016, I was asked to join the board, and to join the board as chair. I'd been given a heads up about some of the challenges that CSL had, so I had high hopes that this was my chance to make a real contribution to an organisation that I had long admired. So it turns out my contribution wasn't quite the one that I was expecting to make. So as chair, and I know as people come onto boards, whether it's as chair or not as chair, just as a member of the board, often you reflect on what's most important for me to do when I first get on the board. What are my own priorities? So for me, that was I knew there was challenges, so I needed to get clear on the financial position, I needed to get clear on the business model. We needed as a board to really set and clarify our priorities and then allocate resources. Step one, getting clear on the financial position. So this was one of the first financial reports that I received at CSL. There's a few things about this. Firstly, you can see a bit of a trend line there. That's our solvency report, right? And you can see where it runs out. But what was interesting was there was no P&L, there was no budget. None of these things were presented to the board. They had been in the past, but at this time, because they'd been, we'd redone the business model and because we had less resources, we didn't have any of those things in place. So for me, step one, get a clear budget together, ensure reporting against budget, ensure we know what's going on with each of those programs. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're going, oh, that's okay. My organisation, we've got a budget. We've got a P&L. I know what's going on. We don't have scary charts like this. We don't have to wind up. Hooray! I can go to one of the other workshops. Let's keep going. Step two, get clear on the business model. So in late 2016, we got the board and the staff together. We were lucky enough to engage Midnight Sky, a consultancy, to do some pro bono work for us to facilitate that day, and they also did some pre-work analysis for us. So the analysis, the pre-workshop analysis, showed a lot of what we already knew. CSL had a fantastic product. We'd done lots of independent evaluations of our program and, in essence, highly valued, appreciated, the best professional development opportunity people had ever done. But the Midnight Sky analysis also looked at our finances, which told us a bit of a story about our business model as well. Again, this told us probably what we already knew, but there's nothing like a scary graph to help distill your thoughts. CSL was running at a loss year to year. We had money, but we were running at a loss. We were eating into our equity at a rate of knots, and you can only go for so long when that's the case. There was many reasons for this. Again, we weren't as bright and shiny and new anymore. It was harder to get philanthropic funds, and we had challenge bringing them in. And that also meant that we had to start charging people for the program. So in the start of CSL, it was free. And then we had to start bringing in fees. That meant that some of the people that do our program, early career, they just didn't necessarily have the means to pay for this sort of program. So that also had an impact on our numbers, people coming into the program. So even though it was life-changing, even though it was oh so needed, as you can see, our numbers were heading south. None of this was a huge surprise, but having the scary graph of our numbers and the scary graph, of our figures, of our dollars, and having the scary graph of our numbers certainly helped us to focus our attention. So our upcoming strategy session had a clear problem to solve. So step 3, set your strategic priorities. We came together in late 2016 for a strategy day. And the result of that strategy day was, unsurprisingly, a renewed focus on growth. You probably can't read all the detail here, but this is the result of that, our plan on a page. 3 things to note here. Firstly, the fellowship program. Our 3 priority areas, the fellowship program. The fellowship is the heart of CSL. So it had to be maintained. But we knew that by itself, it wasn't enough. So our communities program had to grow. And thirdly, our corporate program, our organisational program, needed to be scoped and developed to fund our future and long-term sustainability. Step 4, allocate additional resources. Now, I know it sounds counterintuitive when you're going down, and it's not like we had a huge amount to throw around. But if we were going to get out of this, we needed to grow. So we first made a decision to invest some of our scant funds into business development. We put on a 2-day-a-week role to help build the pipeline for CSL in our community program. And our intention was that this would grow, slowly grow, and we could then expand the role. Secondly, we allocated some pro bono resources, so this was a board member, to review our fellowship program, and I'll talk about that in just a sec. And then thirdly, we also brought in some pro bono resources to help with us on building and developing our corporate offering. So our business development person helped to develop our pipeline for community programs, opening doors, tracking opportunities, following up on conversations. We were really focusing on building that community program to build the sustainability of CSL in the short term. Our work on the fellowship, so one of our board directors took on the role of going through a co-design process with our alumni to review the program delivery. And what came of that was that we tweaked the program so we could expand the retreat time, which is the part that people loved the best, and deliver the weekly workshops online, which meant that we could open up to an Australia-wide program. The third part, working on the corporate program, we engaged an organisation called Partners for Purpose, who provide pro bono support to not-for-profit organisations. So if you're from a not-for-profit organisation, hassle these guys. So what they were tasked with doing was doing a bit of a market analysis, a market entry framework, and a risk register around our corporate offering. So we knew that that wouldn't get off the ground in the short term, but it was building it for our long-term sustainability. So let me summarise 2016. We got clear on our finances and our business model. We determined our strategic priorities, and we allocated resources for what needed to be done. So 2017 was all about delivering on this. We engaged our business development manager. We put pro bono resources into developing up or starting to develop the frameworks for our corporate program. And we put resources into reviewing our fellowship program. And then at the end of the year, we did one additional thing that was essentially our final push. We set about, with the board and our business development person, we rang each and every one of our alumni. It's about 700 of them. We knew that our alumni were our greatest ambassadors. We knew that they were the people that they could get others into our fellowship program. So we rang them all. I had a little call centre operating out of my home office where we would just work through the spreadsheet and ring everyone and really overtly say to them, we need you to find somebody that can do this now national program. Can you find someone for us? Yeah, they said. Fantastic. And so our day of decading dawned even. For us, this is our February meeting. So in February, that's when we really find out the numbers for the fellowship program for that year. Of course, we were working on the community program and getting people into that as well. We were working on the corporate program, but all of that is the icing on the cake for us. The cake itself is our fellowship program. And without that being in place, then our whole basis for being falls away. So the Feb meeting's always a big one for us. And whilst we attract applicants as they were coming in, it's really only ever at the last minute that you know who's really confirmed and who isn't. So our target for that year was to get 50 people into the program. We could break even just at 45, and we could probably just make it work at 43. Any bids? 30? 42, the meaning of life? Somewhere in between. 38. It was gutting. We had done so much work. And we found this out. We'd actually just gone through a process of recruiting new board members because we were so hopeful. And we had them ready to present to board, and we got the numbers. We'd done that during the day. We had a finance committee at 5 o'clock ready for board, and at 5 o'clock they said, this is our numbers. Oh, it was gutting. Anyway, so we knew there and then that wind up had to be on our agenda. But whilst we knew that, as I say, the old goodness me meeting, whilst we knew that wind up was on the agenda, we didn't want to have a fire sale. We wanted to give CSL the best chance of surviving, albeit in what we knew would be a radically new environment. So at that meeting, we decided to proceed with the 2018 program, knowing that it would be at a loss, and that would give us time to work out what our next steps were. We decided also to come together and have our what next meeting, and to do a bit of a survey of staff to find out where their thoughts were. So the staff, this is just an excerpt from the staff survey. We did a staff survey prior to our get-together, and you can see there that almost 70% said that they thought we needed to wind up. We also, for our what next meeting, we were very good at getting pro bono support. Not so good at getting people in the door, but very good at getting pro bono support. So we engaged EY as the independent voice in the room, and you know, it's a leadership organisation. We had staff there, we had the board there. We needed somebody to facilitate the facilitators, which, you know, herding cats, basically. So we knew we needed somebody there to help us out. So when the day came in April 2018, we came together as a group and we reviewed and we reflected and we made decisions for our future. I wish I had a photo of us there together as a group, but I didn't get one. But I did get a photo of all of our outcomes. So at that session, we mapped the outcomes that we were seeking. And that was to continue the impact of CSL through our alumni and to continue the essence of CSL. We also mapped out our transition options. whether we wind up, whether we partner with an organisation, merge, whatever it may be. We determined our transition path, and for that, what we decided to do was to put out an expression of interest for partners to take on, so not really to partner with us as an organisation, but to take on our package, and that we would also make our program IP available to all of our alumni, and importantly, we'd party at the end of it. Now that last part's really important, because remember, we had staff at this session, and staff knew that this meant losing their jobs. The alignment in those views from both staff and the board was incredible, and it was a real relief to us as a board. The vibe from all of us, from the founders of the organisation, from the board, from the staff, was that we wanted to honour what CSL had done and to give it the best chance of continuing success, albeit in a different way, and to make sure that this was a celebration, not a wake. So we mapped out our time frame to the end of the current program, which for that was October 2018. And we mapped out, you might not be able to see all of this, but we mapped out who would do what. We set up working groups. Let's do it this way instead, then you'll be able to see it. We set up working groups for all of the chunks of work that needed to be done and allocated a board member to lead each part of that discussion. We also ensured that there would be it started out weekly and then fortnightly and monthly meeting of the transition working group, which was the chairs of all of those working groups coming together so that we could just keep track of all of the things that were going on at an incredibly quick pace. So we're a national organisation, so we met via Zoom, so this is just the photo of one of our regular transition working group meetings. So what I'm now going to do, after we've had the oh shit meeting and determined our way, what I will now do is take you through each of those elements of our transition. The expression of interest process, the communications around it, the legal steps, the finance steps, and the IP that we needed to bring together. Know that the timeline, because I will be going by topic rather than timeline, will jump around a bit, but I'm sure we'll keep it together. So first, let's talk about the expression of interest process. We put out an EOI document, and what that contained was the context for what we were doing and why we were doing it. It contained what was in the CSL package, and I'll take you through that in a moment. The criteria that we would assess any applicants on, the process, and the timeline. So what were we putting up? The CSL brand, the logo, the fellowship program structure and content. And note, this wasn't a sale. We weren't selling this to anyone, we weren't merging with anyone. What we wanted was a transfer of the organisation, and we wanted to choose the best bidder, not the highest bidder. Which brings me to the criteria. So in essence, we were looking for three things from organisations. They needed to be values aligned. We wrote it much more fulsomely than that, but essentially values alignment. We wanted them to convince us, to ensure us, to comfort us that they had longevity and that they would be able to build CSL. There was no use handing it to another organisation that was going to go through the same challenges that we had had. And thirdly, the alumni network of CSL is central to what we had done, and we needed an organisation that would support our alumni. The EOI also had all of course, the timeline, when it opened, when it closed, the assessment, the panel assessment process, the negotiations, and then, as I've put in very brief terms, the legal stuff. And we then sent it to the world. So, during that process, we had people coming to us asking for information, and we gave them a whole range of information, background, some of the info, all sorts of stuff that we provided for their due diligence through that process. So what happened? We had over 20 applications. That was a good meeting. So we had over 20 applications, big, small, and everything in between. We had some individual operators, we had some medium-sized organisations, and as you'll see in a moment from who took it on, we had some larger organisations as well. So we went through the process of assessing them all and shortlisting, of interviewing the shortlist, of then allocating a preferred partner. Once we got to the preferred partner stage, and I guess partner's a bit of a misnomer really, it was who we were handing over to, But once we got to that stage, we engaged the founder in making the final decision, or one of the founders. There was co-founders, so we engaged one of the founders in that process. And we also engaged the staff in confidence in that process. Again, there was no expectation from them that they were going to get work out of this with the new organisation, but we wanted them to be comfortable with it. And then we finally engaged our preferred provider. As you can see, Monash Sustainable Development Institute, not a small institution, had come to us. And ironically, CSL actually started out of the Monash Green Steps program, which was run by the Monash Sustainable Institute. So in some ways it was going home, as one of our founders said later down the track. So we then, once they were the preferred partner, we had to do some of the legal stuff. I'll show you that in a mo. But importantly, we had an engagement meeting with them where they came together with us and our staff and our providers and a number of the board who were also alumni. It was a fantastic opportunity for us to share what the essence of CSL was and to hand it on to the new people. And it was an incredibly positive experience, and as I say, one of the founders came along to that as well. So that was the EOI process. It sounds so short when you just summarise it like this. That's an excerpt from the Memorandum of Understanding and an excerpt from the Deed of Transfer of the IP. Secondly, the communications. Let me take you through some of our communication strategy. This is part of the mapping that we did for comms. Who do we need to talk to? What priority level are they? What's the first step in communicating with them? What's the main channel? And importantly, who's the CSL team who's responsible? And the board and the staff took on equal parts here. So let me just tell you one story here. I was allocated the past board chairs and the co-founders of the organisation because, you know, that's always a fun thing to do, to ring them and say, hey, this organisation that you founded or this organisation that you have, you know, tended to, guess what, we're in wind-up. So one of the founders, Jason Clark, had continued his involvement in the organisation, both being a speaker at the fellowship, but our other founder, Larissa Brown, hadn't really been involved at all. And I didn't want her finding out on the grapevine. This was her baby. We couldn't just have her finding out through the networks. So I rang Jason. Jason, got to tell you, our numbers were really bad. We're in wind-up. His response was incredible. Don't worry, he says. CSL was never ours. We were just the adoptive parents of it. It's fine to hand it on to the new parents or the new organisation, or maybe CSL will grow up and be on its own. CSL's just moving to a new home. You've got my full support. I'm sure you'll have Larissa's full support. I'll call her. I'll sort it out. If there's any problems, I'll let you know. It was comforting, to say the least, to have that sort of support that comes from your founders. And I'm pretty sure that it was in some part, like the staff, it's because we'd kept them engaged and informed about what was going on, about CSL challenges, that helped them to then understand what was happening at the end. In terms of communications, a few things we did differently. So we did a Facebook Live to the alumni to announce what was happening. It was pretty well attended. And of course, because it's a Facebook Live, it stays up. So we could deal with questions through the Facebook Live, and it remained as a video for people to engage with and hear what was going on. And they could hear it directly from us rather than just getting an email. We also had a final party at the Fellows graduation, a celebration with alumni new and old. So this is Jason, who was one of the founders, the person I was talking about, and he's talking them through the process. Now at that stage we weren't able to announce who the partner was, but we could certainly talk the fellows through what was happening and the process. So the alumni, deep in listening. And one of my favourite photos, this is the staff, and it just seems to me that there is a bit of a look of pride there in what's happening. Again, it's not commiseration, it's not a wake. It's, yeah, we're doing this and it's going to be okay. We also, right towards the end, we had a staff get-together with board, which was at my house, and we got others who were interstate there through Zoom. Again, I can't believe this, but I didn't get any photos of it, but there was champagne. So in summary, with the comms, we engaged our community. We went out to the alumni, we went out to the founders, we went out to funders and met with them personally. We went out to previous board members. We used personal communication wherever we could, and we had an air of celebration, not commiseration. A new life for CSL. Thirdly, the legal stuff. So I've already talked about the deed of transfer of intellectual property that we did with Monash, and we did an MOU with Monash. There is a whole range of other steps that need to happen. This is page 1 of our checklist for legal stuff. So we had to notify the Department of Environment because we are a registered environmental organisation, so we had to notify the Department of Environment. We had to get our assets below $1,000, and once we did that, we could have a meeting of our members, which then resolved to deregister the organisation. We then transferred funds, I should put this one back up, that'll make it easier for you, transferred most of what was left of our funds to an eligible charity, another registered environmental organisation. We then had to notify the ACNC, we then had to notify ASIC, we had to fill in more forms than you can poke a stick at. And through all of this, again, we had some pro bono support from Mark Lawyers in New South Wales, and our company secretary was also a lawyer, which helped us enormously just getting through this ridiculous checklist. Worth knowing it early what needs to happen and some of the forms that we needed to fill in. Forms. Finance. Fourthly, finance. You know, it's ironic. You spend all this time trying to build the money and then you've got to get it to zero. And I tell you, it's harder than you think. Again, I cannot believe that this is just a one-pager because it took us quite... In fact, we still haven't closed the bank accounts. We have formally wound up. We've formally done our forms with ASIC and the ACNC, but we haven't formally closed the bank accounts yet because it's really hard getting it to zero. So what are some of the things we needed to do? We need to finish up the staff. So they finished last year, and this is being recorded, isn't it? I'm not sure if this is quite the right way of doing it, but we paid some of them in advance because we knew there would be work to do, but we also knew we had to wind up all our finances. We had to determine all of our assets and liabilities, and sometimes that can be a little challenging. You know, what are we subscribed to? We had to identify all of our contracts and advise our contractors where we were going. We had an online program and we had to cancel that and go back to all of the people that were subscribers and offer refunds. We had to do our final annual report, our final BAS, and then get a refund and then go back through the funds. We had to have a system for paying some of the ongoing things. We've still got Dropbox, you know, some of the places for holding our documents, so we had to get a load and go card so we could continue to pay these things even though we were in wind-up mode. And finally, when we got it under $1,000, we could then go through those other formal steps that I talked about in the legal section. I should note that the majority of our funds that were left over, we handed over to Monash, and we gave it to them on a promise that they would use it for scholarships into the program. So there was about $120,000 left over that we could give them, which kind of sounds like a nice amount to give them, but when you know that that's all you've got to run an organisation, you know it's not really that much at all. The fifth part for us was the intellectual property. And again, this cannot be underestimated. We were an organisation that had been around for 13 years. And of course, we had some of it documented, but of course, we also had staff that had been around for a long time who tweak things as they go on the run. So we needed to invest, and the board made an investment in this. We used some of our funds to engage the staff to do some extra work around documenting our IP and documenting all of the things that made up the program, because we wanted to give, at that stage we didn't know who our partner was, but we wanted to give our next partner the best possible chance of being able to deliver the program. The staff did an incredible job. Again, this is just an outline of some of the work that they did, but they tracked, they collaborated, and they documented over a decade of program development into something that was easily transferable and that could be easily picked up by the new team. So we did it. After a lot longer than expected, perhaps that should have been predicted, just a month or so ago, it was in June, we met as a board and we resolved to wind up the organisation. It's a little bit of an anticlimax in the end, really. We submitted our forms to ASIC, we submitted our forms to the ACNC. We got our bank account down to zero. We haven't quite closed it yet, but we're there, almost there. We are super proud of CSL, of our staff, of the alumni, of the projects that CSL has spawned. And if you'll allow me a small indulgence to just go through some of them. Our say, These are all from alumni of CSL and sometimes started in CSL. Republic of Everyone, Wild One, Code for Australia, Today, Do It on the Roof. Have I got these in the right order? I think so. From Spark, Talent Nation Recruiters. I am way behind. There we are. Talent Nation Recruiters. The Weekly Service, one that I can't say. Benefit Mindset, Pollinate, and so many more. And we have over 700 alumni currently. I think it will continue to grow as part of Monash. There's pages and pages of the CSL alumni, and our aim in all of this was to keep the spirit of CSL alive and to ensure that and we've got really high hopes that Monash will continue to do that. Indeed, I ran into one of the alumni of CSL just last week on the tram, and she said she'd had a call from Monash. We knew that they weren't going to run the program this year. We knew that they would have a pause and take the time to do a co-development process with alumni. And she said she'd just had a call from Monash asking her for feedback and what they needed to do. It was fantastic to hear that that's happening. So my final tips for you. Know your situation. Know your finances. Know your business model. Know what's going on. Get a few scary graphs going. Hopefully for you they'll be good graphs, but if not, you want to know the scary graph. Try some new things. Do the ring around of your alumni or your members or whatever they may be. Develop a national program, develop a new business model. I know we didn't get there in the end, but these are things that Monash now may be able to take on. Engage experts. We were very lucky to have Midnight Sky, EY, Mark Lawyers, Partners for Purpose to help us in this process. Engage your members and stakeholders. We had the staff at the planning meetings, we had weekly staff meetings, we had a Facebook Live, we engaged wherever we could along the way. Be open with letting your organisation run free. You will have heard before about the founder. Yeah, hand it on, that's okay. The staff were open to handing it on, the alumni were open to handing it on. We had been asked through the EOI process, oh, so your board members, do you need a spot on the board? It's like, well, we'll be on your board if that's helpful to you, but we're not going to demand a spot on your board. It's whatever is best for the organisation, and we're here for you if you need us, but we're not going to get in your way if you don't. And finally, celebrate. Celebrate the new phase. For us, it was celebrating, not commiserating. So that's our story and how we did it at CSL. Finally, just thank you. Thank you for coming to a story like this and for being brave enough from your own organisations to have these conversations around a wind-up and whether that might be needed. As I said earlier, I think this is the sort of thing that we're really proud of. Possibly reframing, but I don't think so. I think it is something that we are really proud of in our organisation. And whilst there was some tears around it, it doesn't have to be all about fears. There's much to celebrate and much to be proud of, even when you're playing the end game. Thank you.